Monika Ertl, a documentarian, a cinematographer, and a revolutionary heroine. Monika is a woman whose story deserves to be told, even without embellishment. Yet when her path crosses that of Ernesto Che Guevara, and when she dares to confront her Nazi father and his sadistic SS friend, her life becomes something truly extraordinary. Let us begin where Monika's story meets Che's. Ernesto Che Guevara. One of the greatest revolutionaries in humanity's history, a soldier in the most important war of all, the class war. The beloved son of the Cuban people. Che could have lived a comfortable life. His family's position, his education, they offered him that path. But instead, he chose the road of struggle. The journey that began on a motorcycle led him all the way to the Cuban Revolution. The spark he and his comrades ignited in Cuba spread across the world, merging with the fires of revolutions everywhere. When Che was cowardly executed on October 9th, 1967, under the orders of fascist General Roberto Quintanilla Pereira in Bolivia, his own journey ended. But new paths opened for the great struggle of humanity. To understand where Monika's life touches his, we go back 30 years to Nazi Germany, 1937. On August 7th, 1937, in Munich, a little girl was born to Hans Ertl, a cameraman who had worked with director Leni Riefenstahl on Nazi propaganda films including Olympia. During World War II, Hans became the personal photographer of General Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox. He was known as Hitler's cameraman. He named his daughter Monika from the Latin monere, meaning to remind. Hans was a close friend of SS officer Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon, who tortured and murdered 40,000 resistance fighters in France. Little Monika spent her childhood calling this monster Uncle Klaus. Her sister Beatrice would later say that their father wasn't truly a Nazi, only a man trying to survive. But after the war, Hans fled Europe wearing a Nazi jacket, joining the many who escaped to South America. He settled with his family in Bolivia, where he built a farm, and there, young Monika discovered the camera. Through her father's work with Bolivian documentarian Jorge Ruiz, she found her love for cinema. We can say that, at the very least, she owed her title of cinematographer to him.
In 1958, Monika married German-Bolivian mining engineer Hans Hargis, lived with him for a time in Chile, and separated from him in the mid-1960s after an unhappy and increasingly restrictive marriage.
According to her sister, she worked part-time as a teacher and spent her remaining hours collecting aid for children. She drifted away from the life her father had built, first among Nazis, then on their quiet farm, and came face to face with poverty, with the working class, with children who had nothing. That encounter changed everything. It reshaped her world. It gave her purpose. She began to take an interest in the guerrilla movements rising across Latin America and soon embraced Marxist-Leninist ideals. It was the time when Che Guevara was killed. After his death, Monika joined the Bolivian National Liberation Army, ELN. Within the movement, she took the name Emila, which in Quechua means young girl or sister. From that moment, she was no longer the daughter of a Nazi, but the comrade of revolutionaries, fighting for the working class. Her father, enraged by her transformation, threw her out of his home, out of his farm, out of his world. But Monika never wanted to cut ties completely. Her sister Beatriz recalled that during her 4 years in guerrilla camps, Monika sent occasional coded letters, short messages like, "I'm alive, I'm safe." No one ever replied. It said that her father was furious, and that Klaus Barbie, her so-called uncle, was helping hunt her across South America, dead or alive. But Monika's plan was not to stay in South America. Che's killer, General Pereira, had become a target for guerrillas. He was reassigned as consul to Hamburg, Germany. Monika's path was clear, from the Bolivian land, where Che had fallen, back to her birthplace, Germany. Determined to take revenge, Monika traveled on a fake passport, first to Switzerland, then to Hamburg. On the morning of April 1st, 1971, at 9:40 a.m., she entered the Bolivian consulate. She introduced herself as an Australian woman, requesting a meeting with Consul Pereira. While waiting, she calmly examined the paintings on the walls. Then, she was called in. She entered the office poised, composed. She greeted Pereira politely. For a brief second, their eyes met. And in that instant, vengeance took form on her beautiful face. She drew her gun and fired 3 perfect shots. As she fled, she left behind her handbag, her wig, a Colt Cobra, .38 special revolver, and a note that read, "Victory or death, ELN." No one knows what Pereira thought in that final moment. But Monika's act, the revenge of the working class, made her a legend. By eliminating the man who killed Che, she gave millions of people hope once again. During the Cold War, in 1973, Monika Ertl was ambushed and killed by agents working for the Bolivian government, led by none other than her uncle, Klaus Barbie, now a CIA collaborator. Her father, Hans Ertl, heard of her death on German radio. On May 12th, 1973, Monika Ertl, murdered as cowardly as Che, was buried in an unmarked grave somewhere in Bolivia. As we look back on her life, we face a truth that she too must have realized long before her death.
Without women, there can be no real mass movement.
Lenin.